Bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Good evening, everyone. This is Andy Steele, your host. Thanks again for listening. Tonight, my guest is Stewart Bradley. He's a former host of the Conspiracy Funhouse podcast, and he's got a great YouTube channel that features a lot of videos about 9/11 truth, and even some parodies that I find absolutely hilarious. Of course, related to 9/11 truth also. So we'll be talking about his videos, some of the great points that he raises in those videos, and a lot of his work is addressed towards the skeptic community, people who brand themselves as professional skeptics. And of course, being a professional skeptic requires that you look at the world in a certain way and apply some rules of critical thinking. Problem is that when it comes to 9/11 truth, a lot of people in the skeptical community, quote unquote, don't apply those rules. They instantly turn their brains off and won't even look at the evidence, won't even consider it, won't even apply any critical thinking to the issue itself. So we get into that in the interview, and we talk about a lot of other things. I have the YouTube channel linked up at 911freefall.com for everyone to see. There's a great one that I've been featuring this week on the front page in the promo for this show, where he parodies the technical briefing that NIST had when it released its report on the destruction of World Trade Center 7. That's the one where David Chandler asked his question and got them to admit to the free fall of the building in their revised report. Well, it's a parody. It's pretty funny if you know about this issue, so I recommend everyone check it out. Now, this is another long interview, so we're going to be jumping right into it. Before I do play that for you, though, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that starting now. And that is 10 seconds.
Stewart Bradley is a musician and artist. He was the creator of the Arrow of Truth zine and Bradley Infotainment, which highlights his creative and political activism. He hosts the Conspiracy Funhouse podcast, and he's got a YouTube channel with some of the best down-to-earth 9/11 videos I've ever seen. Stewart, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Great. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Now, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on your background as much as you want, or anything I left out, but something I always ask our guests on this show, because people want to hear it. It's kind of a question that brings people closer together. How did you wake up to the 9/11 truth evidence? What made you start speaking out about it?
Well, I've been interested in conspiracy research for a long time. I started back in the early 90s when I was inspired by people like Jello Biafra and Noam Chomsky to start looking into these things. Oddly enough, they aren't part of the truth movement, but they were my inspirations to get started in these things. And actually, the day that 9/11 happened, I was at work when it happened, and watched the footage on television. And when the towers fall, I knew I knew right away something was wrong, because towers aren't designed to fall like that. So I was immediately suspicious. I mean, at the time, I was already promoting a research paper that I had done on the stealing of the 2000 election. I mean, I knew there was already something fishy about the Bush administration, but I tried to keep suspicions on one side of the brain and the facts on the other side of the brain. But so yeah, when the day of the attack, I kind of knew that something was wrong, and I started listening. I read a book from Nafisa Fed, the War on Freedom, and I found work from Mike Ruppert, and soon after that, I started writing a short script. I wanted to try to present the information of 9/11, but I wanted to do it in an entertaining way. I think a big problem is most people that we're trying to reach with our information don't usually watch documentaries or care much about that kind of thing. So if you try to present it in an entertaining way, hopefully people will watch for the entertainment value and learn something while they're at it. That was kind of the idea behind Bradley Infotainment, was to try to combine fact with entertainment. And the movie that I produced had no budget, and I basically grabbed my friends and put the script in front of their face and had them read the lines. So it's not the greatest film. It's certainly creatively it would be compared to like an Ed Wood student film, that level of quality. But at the same time, I thought the information was good, and it got some good reviews. I had a lot of local showings, and people seemed to like it. Although nationally on the internet, everyone was more gaga about the loose change videos, which I thought were good videos, although sometimes they stepped too far into speculation for my taste. And I think that came back to bite them in the ass when debunkers kept trying to point out all the easy errors that they'd made. And but I continued working, doing a lot of I would spend hours and literally hours debating people online, and with not a lot of success, other than, I would change a few minds here and there, but for the most part, people who are actively debunking aren't open to actually hearing your information. They aren't actually open to changing their mind about their opinion about 9/11. They think it's all bunk, and nothing you can say will change that. But so I figured I wanted to try to incorporate humor into it, to try to, like I said, get people to laugh and think about it. So I started a podcast called the Conspiracy Funhouse, and it lasted on audio for about 2 years, and then I realized that to reach a wider audience, I would people prefer having visuals while they're just listening to something allows too much time for too much distraction. So I started producing videos for the sketches that I'd done, and that became the Stew's Conspiracy Funhouse video series, which is currently on YouTube. And in fact, I just this weekend finished a new one on it's a parody of the Mythbusters show, where they actually try to debunk the 9/11 truth movement and end up accidentally debunking the NIST report instead. So it's gotten a good response so far, and I'm very happy about it.
I've watched your videos. You've got one up there where you have a parody of the technical briefing, or whatever they wanted to call it, where NIST was presenting their report on Building 7. Now, in real life, this was the one where David Chandler got them to admit freefall, not on the spot, but because of his question, they had to release a revised report and admit to the 105 feet of freefall. But you've got a parody of it on there that I think is hilarious. And that answers the question of whether or not you can take a topic like this, which is kind of a bummer to begin with, but also has some technical jargon, and make it funny, and you can. Yeah. So I recommend everybody go out and check your channel. It's just under Stewart Bradley, I think is the name of it, and see it. Now,
Stewart Bradley. I shortened it to Stu because I kept getting confused with the football player.
Oh, okay. I didn't know there was a football player. Shows you how out of the loop I am. I guess there's tons of Andrew Steeles out there. There's a Saturday Night Live actor, or not an actor, but a writer. I used to see his name come up on the credits. So it's hard when you're trying to get your information out there, because it gets confused with somebody that made movies like The Ladies' Man and all sorts of other non-related stuff. But,
exactly.
Now, I watched your videos, and I see that you focus a lot on the skeptic community. Now, people throw this term around, skeptic, loosely, but there's almost a science to being a skeptic, a way that you got to think. So, just to lay a foundation for the audience, how does one have to think and analyze things to be a true skeptic?
Well, to be a true skeptic is you take every claim at face value and actually research it before just dismissing it. I mean, I think the reason why I got into focusing on skeptics was I attended the 2009 DragonCon convention down in Atlanta, and they had they were having a skeptical presentation, panel discussion, I guess, with Phil Plait, with Adam Savage, with Rebecca Watson. So I went to the panel, and after 45 minutes of them talking about how sometimes, you know, the authority version of things is wrong, and you should question everything. So I got up and asked them if they'd heard about the nanothermite paper that had just been published in Bentham, and they had no idea what I was talking about, and essentially said, I think that just asking the question is bias, and that I should just go away. I mean, Adam Savage was the nicest about it. He said he would actually, you know, read the paper before passing judgment, which is what a skeptic would actually do. But the rest of them just basically said, well, it's obviously nonsense. We haven't heard of this paper, but it's obviously nonsense. And the irony of them, you know, after spending all that time going, well, you must question everything. But that's kind of why I started focusing on the skeptical community and going, if you guys were as skeptical of the NIST report as you were of any claim being made by the truther community, you would certainly know that the NIST report is unpeer reviewed. They refuse to share their key calculations, and it's completely unreliable as a verifiable source. But yet that's the thing that they all go to when they're asked these questions. Anyway, but
yeah, and I watched that one video you have where you have the panel discussion up there where they're talking about Charlie Sheen, and people can pass judgment about Charlie Sheen and his character, but he had written that play about talking to Obama about 9/11 truth, and the people in this panel were talking about it. A lot of personal attacks, a lot of arrogance, and look, this is my own personal impression of some of these people out there. I don't even know who they are, to be honest with you. But for people who are supposed to be such critical thinkers and brilliant folks, I mean, they're kind of acting like teeny boppers, talking about their little brother or something. I mean, rolling your eyes doesn't qualify as an argument, and I'm not that impressed with their intellect. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's just they're very dismissive immediately of anything that comes up. They just, anytime someone goes, well, have you seen this? They go, hey, it doesn't matter. We already have our answers that we want, and we're not going to look at it anymore. And end of story, you know. And you can put dozens of videos in front of them. You can put all kinds of information in front of them, but if they refuse to look at it and examine it, then they can't. You know, they refuse to debate it because they won't look at it. And don't get me wrong, I have immense respect for people like Adam Savage and Steve Novella and many others in the skeptical community, because I agree with them on a lot of topics, because, you know, you can trust science to determine fact from fiction. But they're not, when it comes to 9/11, they're not employing it. They're not following their own rules when it comes to 9/11. And I keep trying to point that out to them in just the simplest and kindest of terms. I've found that while debating with people that trying to look at things from their point of view and trying to keep their perspective in hand is the best way to go about it, and being as polite and respectful as possible, because you know, they have a right to their opinion, and I understand that. But if their opinion's wrong, then you also have a right to point that out to them. And the skeptical community has been very adamant about not wanting to hear about it. In fact, the presentation where they talked about Charlie Sheen, that's the presentation where they discussed they talked about my ambush question to the DragonCon panel, and they said that Steve Novella actually said that he looked up the paper that I was talking about, the nanothermite paper, and said that I wasn't debunking nanothermite. I was trying to debunk another chemical called diethylpropene. That was a Steve Jones paper, a different paper. And he made this statement in front of this entire audience of skeptics, people who claim to be skeptics, and they all just applauded and took his word for it. And end of discussion. And I'm like, if these people are skeptics, wouldn't they want him to at least back up anything he says with some sort of information? I mean, these are supposed to be skeptics. I mean, what you know, when it comes to levity, making jokes about 9/11 is in dangerously bad taste, area. And you have to be very careful, because I don't find the attack of 9/11 funny in any way. But what I do find hilarious are the mental gymnastics that skeptics and debunkers will go through to avoid addressing any of the real evidence being presented. And so that's what I try to focus on. Try to get people to understand that if you claim to be a skeptic, then it's your job to look at the evidence before you pass judgment.
Well, it's almost like a Simpsons episode. I mean, the same kind of humor to express the stupidity of the people of Springfield sometimes could be applied to the American skeptical community. I use that term loosely. You know, I remember even before 9/11, they had a free thinkers club at my college, and me and my friend went down there. You know, you say free thinkers, you think people are open to anything, analyzing any kind of topic openly, and basically it was what I saw at this club was reflected in this panel that you put in your video. As just people who are closed-minded, and these so-called intellectuals have their own religion. A lot of times it's just their own ego of being an intellectual and knowing more than you and refusing to even look at something. And there are people who I would consider very smart, who I would argue with. I mean, folks, I didn't just become a truther overnight after watching Loose Change. I researched this for months before I would even talk about it with friends. Because it just, I mean, I understand somewhat the bias to an extent. I don't excuse it. But when you hear something like this, it just sounds so out of left field if you haven't been exposed to it. So I tried to debunk it. I couldn't debunk it. And the reactions of people, certain people, when you bring this up, unable to even address the facts you're pointing out, but belittling you. I remember I got in a debate with somebody who was a good debater, and he was a very smart guy, and we would argue on certain points. But when it came to Building 7, he just wrote it off as that's probably something we just don't need to know about. And that was such an eye-opening moment, not just for realizing that we have a problem with the official story, but we have a problem in America. People just, I don't know, I can't even understand the psychology. It's almost like they've been, and don't misinterpret this, I don't mean literally people, but in a figurative way, taken over by the pod people or something. Because I just can't identify with that kind of mentality. I'll tell you what, folks, and you know, if we're talking about crazy scenarios, let's just say hypothetically, I'm a very skeptical person, just naturally. But let's say hypothetically somebody was telling me there's an abominable snowman in the town. Now, I mean, obviously I'm going to think that's ridiculous, but if you start to present some kind of evidence, if I start seeing overwhelming things and numerous accounts, I'm not necessarily going to believe it, but I'm going to start looking into it. I'm going to start analyzing every fact and either debunking it or going down a new path if I find other evidence. That's what real analysis does. You don't just close your mind to something, even if it goes against your worldview. And that's what a lot of these skeptics have done. And in the case of the World Trade Center and the Building 7, the evidence is so overwhelming, even if you're not a scientist, even if you don't do any kind of analysis from the beginning, watching Building 7 coming down and using some critical thinking should tell you that there's something wrong with the story, because a 47-story steel frame high-rise falling in 6.5 seconds doesn't happen because of fire. It never did before and it never did after, so immediately your spidey senses should be going off. But America has turned off their intuition. Now, let's talk about emotional bias. You talk about it in one of your videos, and this kind of plays into what we were talking about. How much do you think the emotional bias plays into this closed-mindedness from skeptics and Americans in general?
A lot. I mean, I think the hardest part of winning these people over is the fact that they've already come out publicly against 9/11 truth so adamantly that they're going to have to eat a bit of crow to change their mind. And because that becomes a personal stake in their case, that they personally won't look at the information, because if they're wrong, they could lose credibility. And I mean, everyone's been wrong about things. I've made huge errors in my research before, and I've when you make a mistake, you have to add that to your equation. That's part of being honest about science, is that when you make an error, you have to add that into your work, and you have to acknowledge it. And these people refuse to do so, and it's frustrating because you can put it in front of them and they refuse to even look at it. And, what's that old saying? You can lead a horse to knowledge, but you can't make them think. And emotionally, they don't want to have to deal with the fact. I mean, I just recently saw a bumper sticker that was being sponsored by the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and it made a list of things that they considered to be bullshit. Are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
But on that list, they list Bigfoot and UFOs and chemtrails, and then just conspiracies. And in general, I'm just like, are they claiming that conspiracies have never happened and don't happen? Because historically, that's ridiculous. People constantly conspire to commit crimes. It's not our imagination. This actually happens. But their mindset is that anytime anyone makes some sort of conspiratorial claim, you immediately assume that it's bunk and don't take anything seriously. And it's the standards for evidence are much different. They always claim that truthers refuse to accept the evidence being presented by NIST or in popular mechanics or whoever, Screw Loose Change or whoever is making this claim, and then they're basing their opinion on the authority of these sources and claiming that we don't have any valid point. They employ their own logical fallacies that they're supposed to be debunking to dismiss these things, and I just think it's completely ironic that they would do so. But emotionally, no one wants to admit that they're the damage is done. We went to war in Afghanistan. We went to war in Iran. We currently have given away all of our personal freedoms to the NSA, based on the idea that 9/11 was a genuine attack. That what we were told was by the authorities was true, and to have to deal with the fact that maybe that wasn't true. Maybe we were fooled on that day. Is tough for them to deal with.
Well, it's weird because it's emotional bias, but it also seems to kind of be an ego bias, at least in my opinion. Again, I try not to presume what's going on in people's heads, but you have these people who brand themselves as intellectuals, and usually branding yourself as an intellectual many times for people is basically labeling yourself as smarter than the general rabble, than the rank and file out there that you're lecturing down to. And there's so many of these people, like you said, have come out and just their initial gut reaction says, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's just bunkery." I mean, I got the email from somebody who was forwarded it days after 9/11. I didn't get emotional about it. I just kind of said, "Wow, these conspiracy things their theorists are wasting any time getting this stuff out immediately." I was wrong. I mean, folks, I supported the Iraq War initially because I believe the official story of 9/11, and I believe Bush was just doing the best he could. Okay, it's okay to be wrong.
Right,
all right, and that's the problem, is that we have so much invested in our egos, especially with people who come out and make statements on things like Noam Chomsky, who we'll get to in a minute, but we have so much invested in our egos that we become blind that even when we see information that challenges our worldview or challenges what we have previously gone on record as stating, people turn their eyes away from it. And that is a huge problem. I mean, how much do you think it is the ego versus emotions? Because then you get into this element, too, of just people don't want to deal with this reality and the implications of it, because then it makes you challenge, what you believe in, the world you live in, the nation you live in. I mean, how much of it is ego versus just fear, I guess?
Yeah, ego does really come into play. Especially, I found that trying to talk rationally to people who have some sort of celebrity as skeptics. Emery is comes to mind. He runs the Skeptic Tank, the Skeptically Yours podcast, and I reached out to him and was trying to go, look, you're a bright guy, and we agree on a lot of stuff. So why can't you just take a look at this and give me your honest opinion? And he would just kind of rail on, it's already been covered so many times. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm not going to bother, going over it again. And it's like it's you do feel it's a bit of his ego going, if I am wrong about this, how do I tell my fans that I've changed my mind without looking like an idiot? And so the only downside of making mistakes is if you don't learn from them. Most truthers, I hate using the term truther, but that's what we're branded as. But most truth researchers were fooled. They believed in the official stories, and until they found one fact, they found something in the official story that didn't jive with them. And they had to honestly ask themselves, am I going to ignore this? Am I going to admit it and acknowledge it and ask questions? It takes a bit of bravery, because as soon as you come out publicly saying, I question the attack, you're going to be attacked yourself. You're going to be demonized and vilified by friends, by family, by media. It's happened to me, and I've grown a pretty thick skin to it. But most people are very afraid about their public image, and especially in the world of politics, if you come out as a truther and have any aspirations for a political career, you're finished. People will use that as a reason to dismiss anything you say. But it's a tough line to walk.
Well, it's funny, and I didn't really delve into controversial topics before 9/11, so maybe this is not a good measuring stick, but it just seems like the people were nicer before 9/11 happened and before all of this controversy. And I've said this before, is that when people started asking questions about this, the media would jump down their throats, and so this initiates a defensive mechanism within the people who are questioning 9/11. So a lot of times people might brand 9/11 truthers as being emotional and kind of. I don't even think they're mean-spirited, but it's because they're being defensive and because they have to respond to attacks like this. I just want people to bring down their tone. And one thing I just want to throw out there is how much does it say about our current post-9/11 world, our current state in America, where the word truth is a slur against somebody? If we're truthers, then what's the other side? The lie to yourselfers? That's kind of long, but I guess it applies. Go ahead.
Yeah, John Michael Talbot just posted a bumper sticker that said, "I'd rather be a truther than a liar." Which, what's the opposite of a truther? It's someone who tells, someone who's a liar. But the media loves to use the tactic of associating 9/11 truth with anti-Semitism, with moon hoax people, with Bigfoot people, with anything that raises ire in people and goes, oh, that's obviously ridiculous, so we have to treat the truthers with the same disdain as we do with people who deny the Holocaust happened, and that's the kind of it's accepted to be rude to truthers because they're so vilified by the media, and that's once again it's one of those things where if the public is doing it, if it's publicly accepted, then everyone's going to go along with it. No one wants to be that guy in the room who's raising questions and causing problems when everyone's quite content with the information that we have. But it's what you have to do if you want to be honest to skepticism and honest to science.
Right, and I think it might have been Alex Jones who branded the term, at least for me, mass peer pressure. I use it all the time because that's exactly what they're using. They're trying to turn everybody against the guy that's asking rational questions. Now, it doesn't work on me. I mean, high school ended when I was 18, and I moved off into the adult world and became a grown-up, so I really don't care. But, yeah, everybody went along with Nazi Germany, or the majority of people in Germany, and they ended up being wrong. So I actually learned the lessons from history and realized that just because the overall public might believe something or might be uninformed, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. But on a lot of people, it works, and I don't know what you do to overcome it other than make 9/11 truth more cool and more acceptable. I believe it's the direction is to take it is telling people what kind of good things that could come from a mass acknowledgement of 9/11 truth, and we're working on something to promote that idea. Now, let's talk about Noam Chomsky. Coming up, people would always fixate on Noam Chomsky. We need to have him look at this evidence. And I'll be honest, I didn't know much about Noam Chomsky until I got involved with 9/11 Truth. But what I've seen of him in some of these videos where he addresses questions about it, I'm not really impressed by him. I don't understand what the big deal is because he doesn't even seem like a real critical thinker. And I don't care what he's done on other issues. And this particular one really shows the person inside him to me. And again, I'm not impressed. So go ahead and talk about that and what you talk about in your videos about Noam Chomsky.
Well, Noam Chomsky for me is like a love-hate relationship because because he really has done great work in the past exposing things like the secret covert programs, covert support for things that the American people have no knowledge of. So I mean, I assumed that he would be on the forefront of this issue, and he refuses to talk about it. And a problem with the Noam had before was his dismissal of any JFK evidence. And he was caught basically saying, just because someone gets killed, what's it matter? It doesn't make any difference, even if he's the president of the United States. And it's like, do I have to explain to Noam Chomsky that when someone assassinates the president of a country, that it is a big deal? that usually signals some sort of coup, or So I've been befuddled by his response, and I have so many friends who respect him to the point where, like I said before, Jello Biafra was one of my inspirations to get involved in conspiracy research, and I got to meet him, and through a friend of a friend, I actually got to meet him, and he's still of the mind that if Noam Chomsky says that 9/11 Truth doesn't have any validity, then he's not going to bother picking up on it. And once again, we have consensus by authority instead of any kind of actual factual information that they're going off of. They say not to meet your heroes, and it's actually kind of true. I still love those guys. I still support their past work, but I think on 9/11 they're not taking it seriously. They're purposely blocking out what they don't want to hear. And the video response that I have to Noam Chomsky kind of deals with some of those things where, he's like, well, first off, we all know that you can't keep secrets. Whenever any time conspiracy happens, someone always talks, and we always find out later. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a logical fallacy anyway, because we have no idea how many conspiracies have been committed because they have been kept secret. We only know about the conspiracies that have been exposed because the other ones have not been exposed. So how can you discount them? He makes a lot of very strange comments when it comes to he actually mentioned, you ask him what the truthers believe, and his version is very hyperbole. He's like, oh, they say that Bush put nanothermite, whatever that is, into Tower 7 or whatever. What does it mean? I don't know what it means. Does it mean anything? And it's like, just a statement like that shows how uncurious he is about the topic, because people like Barry Zwicker, who have personally tried to get Noam Chomsky And friends of Noam Chomsky to look at the evidence have had no success whatsoever. He refuses to acknowledge it. So, how do you argue with someone? It's like arguing with a brick wall, If they refuse to acknowledge what you're saying, then there's no point in arguing. But,
when he was confronted at this one event by somebody, and he said something like, because he was talking about 9/11 truth, and he said something to the effect of, well, just spending an hour on the internet doesn't make you an architect or an engineer, and implying that all those over 2,000 building experts, and look, folks, I know the people who verify these experts and who signed the petition, and it's a process that they have to go through.
They're very careful about it, yeah.
They are. I've had people on the show to talk about it, and so that's an insult to all of those folks who have spent those years and gotten their degrees and have worked in their fields, to just imply that there's somebody who spent an hour on the internet. I don't claim to be a building expert. I'm just an activist highlighting the building expert. So there is a difference, and 9/11 Truth separates them. Obviously, they don't cite the thousands upon thousands of other people like myself who just have common sense and some discernment. They don't cite them along with the 2,000 building experts. They don't include them in that category, but there's also those other people. But that is a complete insult, and it shows a lack of intelligence on this man's part. I don't care how intelligent people believe that he is. When you say statements like that, I'm going to call it for what it is, and I mean that's just pure stupid. And it sounds almost like Chris Smith when he was confronted on C-SPAN, about towers and Building 7, and he's just throwing stuff out there hoping it's going to stick. It's like, well, maybe they cut corners in the construction. I don't know that, but you're just kind of throwing these things out there. And when people say things like, well, what does it matter anyway? It reminds me when I was really young, I worked at the store and somebody was stealing money. I was able to figure out who it was through some masterful detective work, and I won't get into it now, but it went from this person who was doing it saying, well, I'm not doing it. And then in a split second, she says, like, what do you care about $50 anyway? And you can tell that the argument is starting to break down and that this person knows that they're caught. And you can see this on a societal level with people who are supposed to be so skeptical, supposed to be looking out for the interests of America, so intellectual. They base their career on this, where they say, you present them with evidence and they say, well, what do you care if it was one guy that was killed, like he was the president? What do you care if 9/11 was an inside job? I mean, that's It's stupid on its face. I mean, the people who died, the wars that followed, were still living in the aftermath of 9/11. I shouldn't have to state all of this. So again, I don't see what the big deal about Noam Chomsky is.
Like, the one video that he says first he says, well, it didn't happen. Here's why: because the Republicans would be crazy to do something like this. Of course, taking for granted that it was the Republicans. Assuming that we're saying that it was the Republicans who did this, because if it was found out, then it would destroy the Republican Party. So his first point was to try something like this would be crazy, because if it was exposed, it would he said the Bush administration would be lined up in front of a firing squad, and then not 5 minutes later he says, well, if it is an inside job, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. In the long run, there's always things that happen we can't explain and blah, blah, blah. And exactly. He delves into that he knows he's wrong, but he's not going to admit it, But, dealing with Noam Chomsky was difficult for me because he had been such a hero of mine for a long time. And at this point, I think he, I hate using the term gatekeeper because it's such a blanket term. But he really is. He really seems to be purposely denying any 9/11 conspiracy theory because of I don't know why his motive is, other than to sell his own book on his own theories. But it's difficult because, like I said, I have so many friends who go, well, you might have a point, but if Noam Chomsky says it's not worth looking at, then we're not going to discuss it. And I'm like, then you're not being a critical, Like Noam Chomsky is the guy who, for years, tells people, don't believe what the authority tells you. Question everything. You have to question everything and take everything with a grain of salt. And people going, yeah, he's right. I shouldn't listen to anything other than what he tells me. He becomes the authority and telling people to think freely.
Well, people are so eager to run into camps, and it's so ridiculous. Like the whole Republican and Democrat thing, or what you just said about Noam Chomsky. Well, you got a point. But if Noam Chomsky doesn't think it, well, then I'm not going to either. I have people I've dealt with who were talking about on some other topic, far away from 9/11 truth, and I had made a point that something that a Republican congressman had said was correct over what the Democrats were saying on this one issue. I'm not saying Republicans are right about everything either, but on this one issue. So now this forever after, I'm branded as just this neocon-loving Republican in this person's eyes. So then something else comes up, and I think it was Karl Rove criticizing Hillary Clinton or saying she was brain damaged or something.
Right.
And everybody getting mad at him about this. And this person approaches me with a smile on his face. He's like, how do you like your boy Karl Rove saying this about, now everybody hates him? And it's like, he ain't my boy Karl Rove, but I mean, this person can't understand anything outside of these two little boxes.
Right.
And now just because you defend one person on one point, you're forever in that box. I don't understand this, but it is a problem here in America, and we need to understand it if we're going to have justice on 9/11, if we're going to have a wide acknowledgement of what really happened that day and heal as a country. Folks, 300 million people in America can't be broken down into two political parties, okay? 300 million people in America can't be broken down into a certain group of intellectuals that are opposing each other. Okay, people have their own thoughts and their own experiences, and that doesn't even mean that on certain issues there's people who are right and people who are wrong. It's just people have different outlooks. That's what makes the world so interesting and great. Okay, I mean, this is not really super sophisticated philosophical stuff I'm spewing here. That's what really scares me, is that I don't consider myself a superior intelligence to many people. I'm not stupid, but the fact that I can understand this and the majority of the public doesn't means that we've got a major issue here that we need to address psychologically. That's why we focus so much on psychology on this show too. And you mentioned in your one of your videos that you've got a challenge to other skeptics. What is your challenge to skeptics?
The challenge was to explain three things. First was the molten metal that was documented in Appendix C of the FEMA report. I mean, we have it's documented that the steel girders did melt, and that the temperatures in the fires weren't hot enough to do it. So they keep coming up with the responses I get are, well, if you really read the report, it wasn't melting as much as corrosion. And I'm like, you haven't read the report if you believe that, because you have girders who have melted to the point where they look like Swiss cheese. You can't tell me that was some corrosion that took over decades to occur, and only it was only discovered after the attack. And let's see, the second one was about the free fall, the 2 seconds, 8 stories of a complete free fall from Tower 7. Now, if the official story is that one column 79, fell, how could that cause a chain reaction to cause all columns to fail simultaneously, which is what needs to happen in order for a building to fall without any resistance for 8 stories. And so they don't even want to address that. I haven't had any comments on rebutting that. And I think the third one was, if it was about the nanothermite, whether or not the paint chips or not. They keep trying to dismiss the paper because it wasn't peer reviewed by Bantham. They say it wasn't properly peer reviewed. And my report is, if peer review is the level of credibility, is the the judgment of credibility, then how come that you don't demand that the NIST report be peer-reviewed? Because they haven't, because they refuse to reveal the calculations that supports their claims. So it's an unverified report that they're supporting, and you know, at least the people who have put out the nanothermite paper are inviting people to, you know, to look at their science. They're not hiding it from people like NIST. And I put that video out last year, and I've been very upset by the fact that you know, even though I've been trying to promote it on, you know, Facebook and through different truther and skeptic sites alike, it's got less than 500 hits, but it's there, and it still has remained to be the challenge has remained to be taken up by anyone seriously. So, you know, for me, my first project after that was to try to come up with direct answers to the rebuttals that I do get. And while I was coming up with that material, I started thinking about Adam Savage again, and upset by the fact that he hasn't, at this point, addressed the nanothermite paper that he told me that he would at that live event. And I was like, well, what if MythBusters actually did a scientific review of the NIST report? And that's the basis of the new video that I just posted. Is what if Jamie and Adam actually tried to learn the official story so they could defend it, and in doing so realized that it's undefendable, and that's why you know, although we keep calling for a public debate so that, you know, their experts can explain these things that, you know, aren't explained in the report, they refuse to, you know, no one from NIST will publicly defend their own report. And that speaks volumes right there on how sure they are that they're right. You know, if they refuse to publicly defend it, then how confident are they themselves that it's correct? But so I basically put together the new video to try to address all those questions, and it's 25 minutes long. Most of my videos, I try to make my videos short because I realize people have very short attention spans these days, but I couldn't compress it any more than 25 minutes to try to get all of the points in that I wanted to make, you know. But it's currently stirring up a lot of. I spent my morning basically arguing with debunkers who haven't watched the video but still insist that nothing scientific has ever come out of the truther community. So, you know, if you don't watch the video, then how can you say that nothing scientific is in there? Yeah, do you have some ESP that allows you to know beforehand what a video has in it? You know, it's like, these are skeptics. Like, I keep getting back to the point that these are the people who are supposed to be judging things on scientific validity, and instead they refuse to look at the science and simply make ad hominem attacks on the people making the claims. And, you know, can anything be less scientific than that, you know?
Well, it's stupid. I mean, it's a default. It's a surrender. When you say I'm not even gonna, they've done this on Washington Journal. Certain people, when you ask them specific questions about Building 7, just using their common sense. You don't have to be a scientist, folks, to understand these concepts. You just had to have at least gone to class in 9th grade, and they'll pass on the question. It's like in boxing. If you have the heavyweight champion of the world lined up against a bad boxer, is somebody that's just kind of thrown up there to kind of take a dive, not even take a dive, but just, you know, doesn't have the skill of the champion. And the champion shows up at the ring and says, well, he's so bad, I'm not even going to fight him. I'm not even going to take him on. Now, okay, you can say, oh, he's just going up against a bad boxer. I mean, that's ridiculous on his face, but then he can start applying that to boxers that are pretty good and might beat him. And so at a certain point, if the heavyweight champion of the world has the chance to do this, some real challenge might come up to him, and want to fight him. He says, no, you are so bad, I know I'm going to just mop the floor with you. I refuse to even box you. What would happen now is all the sports writers would start calling him a coward, calling him a paper champion, and rightly so. And that's what's going on with 9/11 Truth.
Especially if the guy goes running up and grabs the belt and he's like, it's my belt, I'm the winner, and it's like, well, you didn't even fight yet. How can you be the winner if you refuse to even fight? But Yeah,
well,
good analogy.
well, and it's like, we talk about the post 9/11 world, which we're now in, and I dream of the post 9/11 truth world where it's widely acknowledged and we have some major reforms. One of the reforms that we'll need to do is a rewriting of the standards of what government agencies conducting these investigations, like NIST, the standards that they have to meet in order to submit their final report. I mean, one of them has to be submitted up to independent peer review. I hope members of AE 9/11 Truth are in that, whatever it is that, in the writing of that bill, I guess it would have to go through Congress, are involved in that and the post 9/11 Truth world, because, I mean, it just amazed me when I heard that they didn't have to submit it for peer review. I mean, what kind of report is that? What kind of science is that? That the data has to be made publicly available. I mean, there's no basic no-brainer things. Go ahead.
Their official statement on why their work doesn't need to be peer reviewed is because they claim that it's not influential scientific information, right? So they're saying that the final report on what happened on 9/11 isn't influential scientific information. I mean, it's like saying the ocean's not wet, you know? But
well, the problem is that the congressmen, they always refer to the 9/11 Commission, but when you really want to get into the technical nitty-gritty, what they should be referring to, and they will eventually when you get down to the nitty-gritty, is they'll refer to the NIST reports, right? Yeah. So they refer to these reports as the standard of what happened.
Right.
But then they say that they're not influential scientific information. So you're getting bounced around. It's like you're calling a company trying to get some kind of a new computer cord sent to you, and you keep on getting bounced around to different departments, and each department is telling you that it's not their department and sending you to somebody else. Everybody's gone through that kind of frustration before. Well, that's what we're going with. Everyone in government's referring to NIST reports as the scientific standard and the final word on what happened, and NIST is saying, well, we don't have to submit it for peer review because we're not influential scientific information. We're not producing that. So who do you believe? So everybody's just left in a loop.
Right. Well, I still my answer is to rely on science, to not just take, like I'm just trading comments with a guy who was saying that the AE 9/11 Truth employs rule by authority, and I'm like, they're asking you to look at the evidence themselves, and like, well, they're saying that there are 2,000 experts means that they have credibility, and I'm like, no, they're saying that they have 2,000 experts that agree that these things can't happen, and they're pointing out these things that you refuse to look at. You know, they're not making an argument by authority. They're asking us to ourselves employ the scientific method, to think critically for ourselves and look at the evidence and come up with our own conclusion, not just take their word for it, you know, which is what NIST does. But,
right. I mean, it's right out there in the open. Richard Gage lays out his case. Think for yourself. The information goes up for peer review, and that's another thing. And you talk about this in your videos of how this fallacy, or it's moving the goalposts. Well, you know, it's not peer reviewed. Well, now it's peer reviewed. Well, we don't like the journal. We don't like this. I mean, they just keep on changing the standards, and the rules don't apply to us. It's like professional wrestling, where you got the good guy being cheated on by the referee and the bad guy wrestler and the guy's manager, and they're all just wailing you with chairs, and we still manage to Hulk out and beat them, though. But it's just, I mean, it's complete crap, and so this is why people get frustrated. This is why people, give up after a while, because it's just you're running up against brick walls. I mean, we're making strides now, so I don't want everyone to get frustrated. I mean, we're winning the war here, but it's been hard fought. Right.
I mean, it's still we're making our case as solid and as foolproof as possible. It's getting people to look at it is the problem. Like, I was so disappointed in Rachel Maddow, who was another person that I supported until she did that hit piece on 9/11 Truth. And they do this often. The media loves to bring on people to talk about 9/11 or AE 9/11. They won't actually talk to Richard Gage or anyone from that group, who can actually defend themselves. It's real easy to rip someone apart if they aren't present to defend themselves, and that's what Rachel Maddow essentially did in this most recent bit on CNN about the pamphlets being handed out at the new World Trade Center Memorial. They don't want to actually talk to someone involved because they might actually have a good point. They'll bring on someone else who agrees that it's all nonsense, and that how blatantly one-sided can an argument be? Before the people watching it go, well, why don't they just have the guy on so he can explain it himself? But that's what passes for journalism these days, and the very fact that we had that sign out in front of the New York Times building, and they successfully ignored it for how long was it up? A month. Just goes to show how ingrained the fear of listening to the truth is. But the truth is the only thing that's going to fix all of the problems that we're having. I mean, if all of the things that are the wars, all the money that's being spent on the wars, not to mention the innocent lives, the lives of our troops, the people are dying. The spying on Americans, the validation for torturing people. This all stems from 9/11, and people like Noam Chomsky says, well, if you people want to focus on 9/11 because it's easier than having to actually try to deal with these problems. But all of these problems come from 9/11. 9/11 was the root of these problems. So not dealing with 9/11 is not going to yield you any results, But that's why I've been doing this for years, and I get really frustrated sometimes to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to bother with it anymore because no one wants to listen. But I keep coming back to it because I have faith that if people actually knew the truth, that they would do the right thing, and if I have any faith in anything other than science, it's faith that people are good at heart and will do the right thing when it comes time.
Right. I think people overall are good, and I think a lot of people are just afraid. And once you erase that fear, because folks, again, acknowledging this is not a big deal. America is a much bigger place than these agencies and these politicians we put in office. America is you, the listener. It's the people around you who make up our culture and just make up the backbone. I mean, these folks that we put in government are our employees. They work for us, okay? And so, again, we are the ones that shape the destiny of this country. And again, we're good people. We just got to erase the fear. And the people who just don't care, who just want to go on and drink their beer and watch the sunset, they're going to go along with whoever wins in the end anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We don't need every single American to go along and join the fight. We just need that charged up minority take the reins. Stewart, we are out of time. I want to thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall, and folks, check out his YouTube channel, Stu Bradley. We'll get a link up at 911freefall.com, but thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and as Carl Sagan said, keep your baloney detectors on.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download this show by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.